It either needs to be taken off the table or they need to execute people in a timely manner.
The average wait time for the 8 people on Idaho's death row since sentencing is around 27 years. And yesterday we told you about why the process is so long in part 1 of investigative reporter Alexandra Duggan's investigation on Idaho's death penalty. Now, some of the reasons include finding a jury, prosecutors proving aggravating factors or circumstances, and the jury has to make a unanimous decision to return a death sentence. After waiting years for a death penalty trial, it could be even longer before someone is actually executed. So today, in part 2 of Alexandra's investigation, she talks to someone affected by Idaho's death penalty. Jan England's brother, John Justad, and bartender Brandy Rains were found dead in the Old Rose Pub in Boise on December 20th of 1990. After months of searching, police arrested 27-year-old Keith Wells. He was sentenced to death for the killings. A little more than 3 years later, he was executed.
I know people have their views on the death penalty, but you know, you might have a change of your opinion when it happens to you, because I really didn't think about it. And there's just no way for you to be able to comprehend what a family member's going through.
Investigative reporter Alexandra Duggan joins us now to talk a little more about part 2 of her investigation into the Idaho's death penalty. And, you know, I think it's easy to assume the families of murder victims would want the death penalty, but why was Jan critical of it after she went through this process? I know you just talked to her.
Well, sure. She just thinks it's too painful for families to sit and wait around for that appeal process. I mean, every time they have to go to a court hearing or they have to go to like an appeal hearing, they relive the worst day of their life every time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're just reliving it over and over again and hearing those gruesome details, I imagine. You know, it took just over 3 years for Keith Wells' arrest to his execution. That's a much shorter amount of time than the 8 people who are currently on Idaho's death row. Right now, have waited, you know, much longer. Talk about that process and why that one was quicker in comparison.
Well, Wells actually dropped his appeals suddenly, and that process would have taken years. But to everyone's shock, he dropped his appeals because he said he didn't want to sit and wait around in a cell on death row for 20, 30, or 40 years because that process is just too long. So he asked the state to execute him, and that's exactly what they did.
When you talked to the victim's sister, I mean, how was, or relative, how was that for you personally as a journalist to hear her talk about it?
I think that it puts a lot of what we cover into perspective, and you know, it humanizes people in that situation and really like gets you to self-reflect and just kind of like have a better understanding of what you're covering when it's really personal for that person.
Well, thank you so much for shedding a lot of light on this, and we'll look at part 2 tonight as well on the news at 10. Alexandra Duggan, thank you so much for joining us here on the news at 5. And tune in tonight to hear the rest of Jan's heartbreaking story and learn more about Idaho's death penalty. You can watch part 1 of the 2-part series right now at KTVB.com.